I wanted to show how this warmth and competence sometimes affects us in all kinds of surprising areas. So this is a tweet that's by Tim Urban, who I would say is a very competent blogger. He tweeted this: I spend a lot of time deciding which sentence in the email is going to have to take one for the team with the exclamation point. So if this is you, if you are high in competence, so this is a highly competent person, highly competent people, it is physically painful for you to use emojis. It is physically painful for you to write that little exclamation point. And that is because for you, that's a distraction. That's not getting things done. Whereas warm folks have the opposite problem. Warm folks, this is a warm replier. I always start with an exclamation point after every sentence, then realize, wait, they can't all have exclamation points. I sound like a lunatic. Then pair them back one by one until only a single exclamation point remains. This is a kind of funny way to think about this, but even down to how we use exclamation points can be dictated by our warmth and competence. It is affecting so many of our social choices. And so even this is why we can sometimes feel like when we're emailing with someone, they are on a totally different page, because they're using too many warmth cues or too few warmth cues. By the way, if you are not sure where you fall, so if I've gone through these and you're like, man, I don't know if I'm warm or competent in the danger zone, we have a quiz. It's a free quiz. You can take it as many times as you want. SciencePeople.com/charisma. And here's an extra challenge for you. So one, take the quiz. It's totally free. You can take it as many times as you want. Where do you fall on the charisma scale? What's even more powerful, and this is the hard one, is have a colleague, a partner, and a friend take it as you. You can screenshot your results. This is a really great way to test. Are you coming across the way you think you come across? So if you think you're higher in warmth, but you send it to a colleague and they list you in competence, that is a very, very important thing to know about yourself. So I highly recommend find your score, take a screenshot, and then have your friends or colleagues, even better, take it and then screenshot your results. It's a great way to test where you come across. Very, very quickly, because I want to make sure I take questions. I'm going to do a tiny bit of nonverbal charisma. So nonverbal is a huge section of the book. We talk about how to use competent and warm body language. I just want to explain here that research finds about 60 to 90% of our communication is nonverbal. This is an incredible finding because, as I mentioned, we tend to think about our words, but actually how we say something is not important as what we say. That delivery is actually critical into how people receive our message. One experiment that I love that I talk about in the book is my team and I analyzed 495 Shark Tank pitches. So I think in the UK, this is Dragon's Den. Shark Tank is a similar show where they have a panel of investors or sharks where entrepreneurs come in the tank, pitch their idea, and the sharks can invest their money. I was curious, all these ideas, everyone who comes into Shark Tank has a good idea, right? They've all made it onto the show. The question is, why do some get an amazing deal, get all 5 offers from the sharks, and some everyone passes? And I wondered if there was something about the delivery of the idea. So what we did is we analyzed as many patterns as we could think of in these Shark Tank pitches. And one very distinct pattern we found, the easiest one we found, is that the best pitchers, the entrepreneurs who are more likely to get a deal, typically use lots and lots of hand gestures. And when we looked at this, it was kind of amazing because it was as if the entrepreneurs who were most competent and most warm were using these gestures. And I think this comes down to 2 different areas. So when Dr. Fisk researched warmth and competence, she found that they actually come sequentially, that warmth has to come first. We have to know if we can trust someone, warmth, before we can know if we can rely on someone, which is competence. And so what we notice is that when entrepreneurs walked into the Shark Tank, the ones that were more likely to get a deal, that were more likely to get bites, often signaled non-verbally with their hands. They would say, "Hi, sharks," or "Kevin, we'd love a deal with you," or "Good morning, sharks," or "I'm here to pitch you my idea." It was as if they were showing their palms saying, "Trust, trust, 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 trust." And this is funny because research shows that when we can't see someone's hands, so if I were to give my presentation with my hands behind my back, it would actually be incredibly distracting for you. And that's because we use hands, visible hands, to see intention, to see if someone trusts us, are they holding anything dangerous, are they going to reach out and handshake us? And so we like to be able to see someone's hands. So the first thing we notice is that the best pictures almost always had visible hands. And you'll notice I have my camera set up even on this video call to try to show the top half of my body. So my hands are almost always in the shot. I have this fancy switcher, right, that can move me all around, is because I want to make sure as much as possible, I have my hands as visible as I possibly can. It helps actually with your comprehension, which is a funny thing that research has found. The second thing that they found is a second thing that my researcher, specifically, this is Jose Pino, so grateful to him. He noticed also that some of the best pictures initiated some kind of touch if they could. So they reach out and shook the shark's hands, they passed out samples, they demoed, they'd have a shark come up and show them something. And the reason for this is because of a chemical called oxytocin. So oxytocin, very simply for our purposes, is a neurotransmitter of trust. It's essential for us to build warmth. And so the bonus tip here is, if there's a way for you to produce oxytocin in the first few minutes of an interaction, this could be a handshake, a cheek kiss, a high five, a hug, that also adds a layer of warmth or trust. So what I want to talk about now, and I'm happy to take questions, I know Luke's going to hop back on, is I want you to pick one cue from today that gets you most excited. It could be a verbal cue, it could be a question inflection, it could be using touch or more gestures. And I want you to see if you can add it into your interactions over the next week. When we think about adopting these cues, it's like trying to trigger muscle memory. So doing one at a time, slowly adopting one at a time, is one of the best ways that not only you can be more charismatic, but also it inspires others to be more charismatic as well. So I'd love to take your questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vanessa. What a brilliant lecture. I'm now hyper scrutinizing everything I'm doing. So I'm now using my hands, which is great.
I love it. Your hands look great. Your hands look great. I love them.
Thank you so much. I brought them just for today. We're going to now move on to some questions. So audience, please, we've already got some great ones. So I'm going to move on to them very quickly. But just one thing from me, Vanessa, you are an expert in body language. Can you ever turn it off? Like, are you at Starbucks or on the bus and you're sort of tempted to critique everyone's cues?
No, you know, this is a warning. So learning cues is a little bit of a blessing and a curse. Once you know them, you see them everywhere. You see them in places you didn't expect. By the way, it makes speed reading people so much more interesting. My husband and I, we love to play good date, bad date, where we sit in a restaurant and we watch people's body language and try to guess if it's a good date or a bad date, see if they're going to get dessert. Like, it's one of our favorite kind of bets. I also, you know, I'm expertly good at reality television shows. Love guessing who's going to win The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. So the answer is no, I can't really turn it off. And actually, for readers, there are 96 cues in the book, right? There's 96 different cues in there. The more you learn, the more you'll see them. And so it can be something that you become a little obsessed with. So I highly recommend reading it with your partner, you know, read it as a team, because once you start seeing them, you'll want to talk about them.
I mean, yeah, it does sound like a blessing and a curse. Okay, so I'm going to move straight on to audience questions. They're all brilliant. Eric asks, as a man on a dating app, it all seems a little bit like a minefield. Any cue tips for my bio?
So many. Okay, so dating apps are kind of great in that you can have a little bit of control over the experience and your first impression, right? So in a speed dating event, for example, it's really hard because you're meeting lots of people, you're doing it immediately. With an app, at least, you can think very carefully about the cues in your profile picture, the cues in your heading or your headline, and the cues in your opening line. So first is you want to make sure that you are sending the right signals in your profile picture. So, and this is up to you, right? Everyone can pick their own unique flavors of warmth or competence. I like to have a both, obviously. So warm cues, a head tilt is a warmth cue. Showing hands in your photo is a warmth cue. So people who are like this or like this. And that's not, not saying you should always do it, but if you want to dial up warmth, those would be good ones to add. So hands in your picture, head tilt, authentic smile, right? Reaching all the way up here. Those are warmth cues. Competence cues, no smile, so very still. Fronting, so angling your body towards the camera. So, you know, this is very warm. That's warmer than this, right? So, you know, you want to see if you're angling your body towards the camera. So I want you to think very carefully about the cues that you're sending, because that is your dating first impression. And then second, use the verbal cues purposefully, right? So whatever verbal cues you have in your profile, think very carefully about what would resonate with your ideal partner. So if your ideal partner, loves adventure. Yes, you want to use adventure words, but even more specifically, if you want to have a deep connection with quality time and long conversation, you want to use words like that. Whereas if you want to have something light and fun and easy, you want to use words like that. Same thing with your openers, right? Like I love openers that are like, what's good? Do anything fun today, right? I think that openers on dating apps on Mondays, had you do anything fun this past weekend, or Fridays, doing anything fun this weekend, are a little easier. So yes, purposeful cues.
There's a great moment in your book where you say there's some research to say don't hold a cat if you're a guy. But I do think that's interesting, like as you were saying, because apparently you look less manly, but like there's also the expectation.
I didn't say that.
No, but I've the implication, right, is that like less strong, less.
Yes. It's so funny. So this is real research, by the way. This is not my research. This is academic research. Someone at an academic university studied if men should hold a cat in their profile picture. And I'm like, I have to include this because the cat is a cue. And I was like, I'm going to get hate mail from cat lovers everywhere. But the research was clear, my friends, which is that, men shouldn't hold a cat. Men shouldn't hold a cat.
That's an absolute nightmare. Okay, so Miranda asks, does the change in language, e.g. using more warm words, work across all cultures, France, Britain, Thailand, etc.?
Yes. So they've repeated these studies with all different languages. Now, of course, the word warmth can be translated differently, but warm words, that's why I said this is a little bit art, not science, is the warm words in your language are words that make you feel the warm and fuzzies, right? So whatever, and there could be even more warm words, by the way, in your culture. So yes, the effect is the same. When we as humans hear a verbal cue that means something to us, triggers warm and fuzzies, or triggers, competence, it's more likely to get our brain ready for that. So yes, the translations could be a little bit different. Also, when we talk about specific cues, like a cat, for example, or that one's sort of a controversial. Let's do a less controversial one. Let's take skiing. Okay, let's take skiing. So like even that is a visual cue. So sometimes, if someone's skiing in their dating profile picture or in their LinkedIn profile picture, they're in winter gear. That is a cue that isn't necessarily positive or negative, isn't necessarily warm or competent, but it's specific. So for example, if you have skiing, the word skiing, or a visual cue for skiing, it might trigger associations for me of adventure, family, vacation, right? Those are all positive. But what if I'm not a good skier? What if I hate skiing and I hate being cold? Well, then it's going to trigger cues of cold, don't like it, don't want to do it. My feet, I want hot cocoa, right? Like those are different kinds of cues. And so I think that that's the next frontier is how are we going to begin to distinguish like specific cues and how they create attraction or, affiliation.
Super interesting. Thank you. So Carrie asks, which characters from movie or TV are good case studies for charisma, or is looking at fiction not very useful? I noticed the Schitt's Creek references throughout your presentation. I appreciated them.
I just love Schitt's Creek. Okay, you know what? I actually am going to do this right now because it's so fun. So I am literally teaching this tomorrow, and I'm going to show you because it's so fun. So there are tons of ways that we can practice using characters. I cannot wait to show you this. I'm so glad someone asked. So it's actually kind of a fun example to think of different characters. So let's take Harry Potter. Okay. So before I show you the answer, I want you to think about, where do you think the Harry Potter characters go? Who is where is what? Okay, I'm going to show you. So think about it for a second. I'm about to reveal the answer. So I think that for good old Harry Potter, let's show you. Right. So for Harry Potter, I think that Hermione is the perfect example of high competence, right? She corrects people on how they should say their spells. It's Leviosa, right? Like that's a Harry Potter joke. Hopefully someone laughed somewhere. So she is like the perfect example of high competence. She corrects people when they get something wrong. I think Ron Weasley is the perfect example of high warmth, right? He's super encouraging. People don't always take him seriously. I mean, I think Harry sort of hits that sweet spot, right? We both love him and he's super, super smart. Of course, right? Like who shall not be named is in the danger zone. He does not cue us enough. Don't be Voldemort. That's the takeaway from this slide. Sometimes I think some other characters can hit the danger zone. I'm going to get like hate mail for Harry Potter fans, but sometimes they can hit the danger zone. I mean, you know, we could keep going, right? Like I can place characters all over the scale. This is Ted Lasso, if you're a fan of that, Star Wars. I mean, like we could, you know, right, we can do this all over the place, which is so fun, and I think that's a great way to practice. I'm glad you asked. Thanks for asking.
Fantastic. So it is a good thing to look to fiction. Let's have a look. Stella has quite a tricky question. I'm deaf, so I know that I sometimes am a little bit behind people in conversations while I work out what they've said. I don't always explain this to people depending on the anticipated level of interaction. Is there a technique to avoid this being interpreted as incompetence? Thank you, Stella.
So actually, this is a good point, because when we were looking at eye patterns, we noticed that when people are lip reading, it changes their eye patterns. And eye patterns, I talk about this in the book, changes how you come across to others. So actually, you're not sending signals of incompetence. It's just that you're sending higher signals of warmth. So what's good to know is that if you are lip reading with people, that actually sends off a signal of warmth. And that's because typically people who are high in competence, their gaze stays at the eye level and up. They don't go down. It's very interesting. Very, very powerful, intimidating people. They are like, they bore into your eyes and they don't leave this zone. Whereas when we are higher in warmth, when we're social gazing, we tend to drop our gaze to the mouth and the nose, and we look at the whole face. So this is not wrong or right, but it does mean that if you are lip reading, you are just sending off more signals of warmth. So that means that you want to send off purposefully counter signals of competence, right? So if you're already high in warmth, great. You just want to also build up that competence. So that would be all the different competence cues. So fronting with someone, using more purposeful hand gestures. Those are all great ways that you can balance out that already high warmth.
Fantastic. A really interesting anonymous attendee says, thank you for the insights, a speculative fun type question. What's your view on how Elizabeth Holmes used cues when seeking investors and as CEO of Theranos? Some have commented on her use of voice register. You are exploding right now. Could you just also briefly explain what happened with Theranos for people who don't?
Yes,
know?
Okay, I'm just making a note for myself because I have to talk about this in the presentation. You're so right. So Elizabeth Holmes, I think, and this is my perspective, and I've researched a lot. I've listened to old interviews of Elizabeth Holmes. I deep dive on this. Like I internet rabbit holes. Elizabeth Holmes, I think, read somewhere that having a lower tone, probably the same study I shared with you, right? That was a 2002 surgeon study. She probably read that study, no doubt, because she was super smart and she is very interested in science for her own motives. I think she read that study and she went, oh, I should go low. Great, I'm going to go as low as I could possibly go. And so she ended up talking like this, but actually it was fake. It wasn't her natural tone. And so it screamed signals of like, wait, what? Like, it doesn't sound right to me. So I actually think that she read that study and went too low. The key to that study is your lowest natural range. So if you're actually like, your voice is hurting and you're going so low that you're down here, that is too low. I think Elizabeth Holmes, 100% that was fake. If you listen to recordings of her when she was much younger, and also employees came out saying that when she was drunk, she used to go into her natural range. That's a cue gone wrong. Cue gone wrong. I have to put that in. I thank you for the reminder. I'm going to add it.
Thank you, anonymous attendee. Okay, so just if you don't mind staying just another 5 minutes, we've got so many questions, and I feel like people really appreciate it. So Domenico asks, hi Vanessa, how can you improve your verbal charisma when you have a foreign accent?
Oh, okay, so verbal charisma and accents are actually different studies, and they actually have studied this. Okay, forgive me, it's been a minute since I read this study, but I actually think this is in the book. So what they talk about, okay, let me just remember it. They actually studied this. They had a professor teach a class with, I believe it was him, don't quote me on that, with his or her natural accent. And they had the professor teach the same exact class with their natural accent, but they added warmth and competence nonverbal cues. They found that the accent without the warmth and competence nonverbal cues, students rated the accent as being annoying, distracting, and less likable. But when the nonverbal warm and competent cues were added, people liked the accents, took it seriously, and thought it was great. So actually there are two separate things. And so sometimes I think an accent alone without enough of the cues to support it, people think of it as distracting, but actually with the right cues, people can like it. I don't remember exactly what page it is. I think that's maybe in chapter 7 or 8, but it's a really interesting study that looks specifically at that. So yeah.
That's fascinating. And it shows how the cues will work together. Reese asks, my size and build makes me look a little bit younger than I am, and I often find that I'm at disadvantage in any work situation. Do you have any suggestions of how to address this?
Yeah, this is a really common issue with people who are a little bit shorter and people who are a little bit taller than average, right? Because, and this is actually, it's partially an evolutionary issue, because when we are children, we look up at people. And so we tend to associate taller people as being more in the know, because it just reminds us of when we were kids and we looked up to get directions from people. The opposite also, when we look down at people, they tend to be children that we take care of. And so we have this horrible bias that we are constantly trying to fight. It's an unconscious bias about height. So this is something really good to know. So if you are shorter in stature, you have to know that you have to dial up competence. Your warmth is already there. You're going to have to work a little harder on the competence side of people to take you seriously. If you are taller than average, you should also know that you have to work higher in warmth. People by default will find you more cold, intimidating, or imposing simply from your height. It's unfortunately an unconscious bias that we can help. I think we can untrain ourselves, but we have to be very aware of it if you're on a different average.
That's really useful to know. Yeah, the heightism in CEO average height is so interesting, isn't it? It's, you know,
yes. Very clear. CEOs typically are taller than average, and the taller you are, the more money you make. And that is simply a default of just how that old reminder of, oh, he's tall, he must be in the know.
Well, actually, I mean, you said he there, and I think that's telling as well, because Stella asks, is warmth without competence often a gendered perception?
Okay, so Dr. Fisk examined gender in her original research, which is really interesting. And what she finds is that women typically, not always, are perceived as higher in warmth. And that is because our mothers were women, right? So, or mothers are women. So even if you were raised by two men, we still associate female with mother. And that just automatically, without even realizing it, makes us see them as a little higher in warmth. Typically, but not always, men are seen as higher in competence. This is just an important bias to know. And it's not extreme. It's actually just a slight difference. And so we should just know that as women, we tend to be seen as higher in warm by default, and men, you typically are seen as higher in competence by default. And that's something that you might, maybe depending on your choice, want to counterbalance or not.
I think it's always just about knowing it, right? And you know, you can rage against the light, but you have to know the stuff.
Yeah, and some people don't want to change that. Cool, right? Like if you want to be high in warmth, own it. Like everyone should have their own flavor of charisma. So you might want to change it, but you might not want to. Yeah, no, knowledge is it.
Absolutely. One last question from Tracy. I am having an interview on Monday. It's on Zoom. What advice would you give me?
Okay, so I actually have a video on this on my YouTube channel. If you look it up, I break it down. So definitely watch that. But for now, one is make sure that you are at least 18 inches, a foot and a half away from your camera. So a big mistake people make is they get really close to the camera, and it's like digital close talking. We don't like it, right? So if I already given my entire presentation like that, you'd be like, whoa, back up. So make sure you're at least 8 inches away from your camera. Try to have your hands in the shot. You don't have to keep them up, but if you can naturally have them in the shot by where you sit or where you stand, that'd be great. And then also make sure that your first 10 words, that's what I would practice. So, if those first 10 words are good morning, it's so good to see you, happy Monday, whatever that is, I want you to be purposeful with the voice and the words.
Really good advice. Hopefully, Stella, that helps you. Good luck on your
interview.
And Jeremy just says, thanks, Vanessa, really brilliant presentation. I've just started a new job and was feeling nervous about meeting a new team, feeling more confident now. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yay.
Thank you all, audience. There's amazing questions, dozens of questions. Sadly, we're going to have to wrap up there. As mentioned earlier, please do check out the brilliant book, Cues, Small Signals, Incredible Impact, and Vanessa's YouTube channel. Do head over to the How To Academy for the rest of our talks this month. Vanessa, thank you so much for brilliant talk, and thank you, audience, for tuning in. We hope to see you all very soon. Stay healthy and safe. Vanessa, final word over to you.
Oh my goodness. Remember that one cue at a time builds confidence. So I talked about a lot of cues today. Just pick one that makes you feel really good, that makes you feel excited. Every one that you add to your toolbox is one more that you get to be purposeful with. I'm super excited to hear how you use it. Keep in touch. Send me your favorite cue. I love to see them on social. And thanks so much for having me.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Good luck.